Okay, our session was on climate change and dignity, and we spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how to approach this for this video. So you see behind me this frame, and the frame is a visual representation of a metaphor that we came up with, that we started by opening a window into a vast topic, but the window is open very, very little, just a wee bit, as they say, a wee bit opening. And when we opened the window, what came out were both macro level discussions of climate change and dignity and micro level discussions of climate change and dignity, meaning what we can do in the world politically, and then what we can do locally, and then what do we need to do in our own psyches to make change happen. And we began to explore all these three levels in our discussion. And one of the major levels that we discussed, which is probably the hardest psychologically, is that perhaps we can't fix it. And that we need to develop a different mindset from fixing what's happening in terms of climate change to finding other ways of dealing with what is now. That is a completely radical idea, because so much of what's out there in terms of a discussion of climate change is like putting Band-Aids and bandages on things, and we can't fix it. It's here, it's now, and now we need to have a way to figure it out. I presented a metaphor of how to present this on a psychological level. And I saw it as the metaphor of when you go into the hospital and they do an intravenous feed, and they titrate how much of the feed is there. We need to titrate that information in dosages that people can hear without causing defensiveness, shutdown, and aggression against what is being said. The other area that came up was the area of, which people do not talk about, of grief, loss, and bereavement for ways of life and cultures that are going to die. That the way we see the world is going to die. And that's real. And how do we develop ways of helping ourselves and others deal with the reality of a world that cannot be fixed, because as we're moving forward, a new world is emerging. Deal with where we go next.
Okay. Well, just to say, what we realized is that in this discussion today, we were meeting for the very first time to talk about it. So when you get together with others, among yourselves, to talk about this, what you talk about the first time you get together won't be the same as what you talk about the second or the 10th or the 20th time. Things slowly emerge as you feel safer with each other. So you can find a whole bunch of topics come up and nothing feels resolved. You can feel a little frustrated, and that's all right. That means you just open the window enough to know there's stuff there. And you let the window close a little bit, and you meet again. And you do the same thing, and over, and slowly the wisdom among you will start to emerge and congeal, and you'll have thoughts about what would be helpful to do, what is true, what isn't true. you'll begin to know for yourselves. And that's what you can trust in.
We ended our talk looking at how our preoccupation with time may be preventing us from doing some really important healing. So if we don't necessarily have to go into a religious viewpoint, but from a more spiritual viewpoint, if we can develop whatever is evolving. And the issue is, how do we learn to live in that evolution?
Yeah, so we realized, there's this 10-year window. We have 2020 to 2030 to do all these things. And we realized just invoking that puts us into this fight and flight, adrenaline-charged state, where it's hard to actually think. It's kind of a panic state. So on the one hand, it's good to know we need to move quickly and be serious. On the other hand, it's not so good to be quite so panicked about things. And it's so important to balance that in some way where you can allow the goodness within yourselves to kind of guide things. And you'll do better things from that place where there's some kind of balance of inner serenity and groundedness in what's really going on. So it's a great balancing act, and you're human beings, so you have it in you to be able to do exactly that kind of balancing act.
A little postscript coda. One of the members of our group asked me, how do I deal with when I have clients who were traumatized by all of this, how do I deal with it afterwards, after seeing them? And I said to him, I need to develop, or I have developed self-care, of meditation, of doing things that can get me back to my center. And that's something that I think all of us need to develop if we're going to tackle these issues. We need to develop a program of our own of self-care. And one of those ways that the group agreed was a very important way is to remember we're not alone, and develop groups on a local level, on a neighborhood level, on a friendship level, on a organizational level, where you meet regularly to talk about this material, your feelings, so that you don't have to face this alone. This is not something to be faced alone.
And just remember that in such groups there can be many different viewpoints, many different ideas of what the facts are, many different kinds of feelings, and that's totally okay. Just live with it. It's what we like to say is give dignity to each other. Give dignity to each other and allow all that different viewpoints to kind of settle in over time. Good things will come in time. Have faith in all of you, and as I say, extending dignity makes all the difference. You don't need to be in a fight. You need to let the wisdom come through in its own good time.